Let-Lok Assembly. Gather the required tools and check that they are clean and in good working condition. 1. Tube cutter. 2. Tube deburring tool. 3. Inspection gauges. 4. Standard wrenches. The second step, cutting. To attain a leak-free connection, cut the tubing. Square with a good quality tube cutter with a wheel designed for the tubing material. Mark the tubing at the desired location 360 degrees around the tubing circumference using non-scratching marking device such as a marker or wax pencil. Align the cutter around the marked place to be cut and tighten over the tube so that the wheel firmly touches the outside diameter, OD, of the tubing. Do not over-tighten to tubing cutter as damage to the tool or the tubing may occur. Rotate the cutter around the pipe, following the score and tightening 1/8 of a turn every 2 rotations until the wheel penetrates the inside diameter, ID, of the tubing. Do not try to reduce the time of cutting by over-tightening the wheel. This can force the tubing out of round or will harden the tube OD. Third step, tube deburring. Gloves and eye protection are strongly recommended to prevent injury. The cutting wheel on a tube cutter does not remove material, but instead displaces it, leaving a raised area at the cut and often pushing material into the ID. Removal of this material is essential to proper fitting performance and system integrity. To deburr the OD of the tubing, firmly insert the tubing into the OD side of the tool and rotate the tubing evenly until all burrs are removed. A slight chamfer on the end of the tubing is acceptable. To deburr the ID of the tubing, firmly insert the tubing into the ID side of the tool and rotate the tubing evenly until all burrs are removed. A slight internal chamfer on the end of the tubing is acceptable. Remove metal chips from inside the tube. Wipe the inside and outside of the deburred tube end with a clean rag. The fourth step, installing Let-Lok fitting. Let-Lok fittings are supplied assembled and finger tight. Insert the tubing into the Let-Lok fitting. Check that the tube rests firmly on the fitting shoulder and that the nut is finger tight. Mark the nut at the 3 o'clock position. For all fittings 1/4 to 6 millimeters and larger, tighten the nut 1/4 turn so that the mark is now at the 6 o'clock position. For all fittings smaller than 3/16 to 4 millimeter, only 3/4 of a turn past finger tight is required to assemble. Further tightening may damage the fitting or restrict flow through the tubing. The fifth step, inspection. After initial assembly of the fitting, use an inspection gauge to ensure that the full 1/4 turns have been achieved. Insert the correct gauge between nut and body. If the gauge fits into the gap, the fitting has not been sufficiently tightened. If the gauge cannot enter the gap, then you are assured the fitting is sufficiently tightened. Do not use the gauge for reassembled fitting.